Hello friends, I hope you guys are well. Today we have a special guest here where we'll be talking about many things about life, how we see life, how we perceive life. His name is Tristan. I'll get him to introduce himself. And he's full of knowledge, full of wisdom. And he will sort of tease your mind in places where you've not been teased. You know, you will open your mind in how we see the world and the harmful things that we may not even perceived. So it's a different take here on this channel. As you guys know, that I talk about addictions, health, and improving yourself as a person. But just giving up cigarettes is one aspect. There are many other things that we can work on and different perspectives. So that's why I've introduced this gentleman here called Tristan. And I'll get him to make his own introduction. Tristan, take over, mate. You all right?
Jod, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to sit with you in the sun out here.
Likewise.
And this is a landmark event because this is the first time I've ever done anything on camera with somebody else.
Yes.
So yes, exciting. I guess to meet your audience where they're starting from, and in fact where we all start every single second, is everything that we do is actually defined by our identity, who we think we are, and is driven at some level by who or what we want to become. And that is very much influenced by our worldview, by how we individually look at the world. Because of course life is, we are all experiencing our own unique version of life, and so our perspective is hugely important.
I agree.
Where to start? I think a sensible place to start is that we all tend to get locked into our own heads, into our own way of doing things through habituation and familiarity. And I think from a very early age, despite the innate curiosity that we have as children, to a greater or lesser extent, that's that need to ask questions, to find out how the world works around us and the reason behind things, we lose. And so if we're doing the same thing day in, day out, most of our activity is actually driven by habituation. We're an autopilot. And of course, every moment of every day, say in nature, there is this ever-present consideration of, am I going to be somebody else's next meal? Mm-hmm. Or is somebody else going to be my next meal? Yeah. And I think that fundamental driver, if you like, of our survival instinct at that most basic level is something that we have lost as an imperative as an important thing to drive the way we do things. So increasingly, for example, your audience, your viewers will recognize that the quality of the air they breathe is hugely important, and that's why they're on a journey to reduce and eliminate smoking, to quit, to use a smokerism, which I'm not, so the idea of quitting is not as deeply ingrained in my psyche as say for smokers.
Sure.
But if you're going to improve one thing, whatever that is, that's a model for how you can be improving other things. And of course, how you approach that can be driven by the sorts of questions you ask, mm-hmm. the things you ask those questions about, and then of course the way you choose to respond to those.
Absolutely, very interesting. And as some of you guys may know, and also Tristan know, that I was a smoker. I smoked cigarettes. I've given up, and I'm pleased to say it's been 10 weeks plus that I've given up. And I'm not looking back. Life is so much better to be free from addictions and slavery of it. It's a form of slavery. And yes, once you quit something that's harmful, that you can control and you can eliminate from your life, then there are other aspects as well where the air you breathe in, as you alluded to, but then it comes to a point where it hits a category where the controllables. You may be able to control the air quality in your room. You get a filtration system. You can, to an extent, clean the air that you breathe in your environment, in your home. But then beyond that, it's sort of out of your control. It becomes the control of the state, the establishment. And how do you go about that? Then I'm sure you have people like yourself who are very knowledgeable in that aspect, that will need to interact and communicate with these people who have power and authority to do something. But whether they do something, it's a broad multitude of strings that you may need to play about with to get anything done. But you can give me a take on what I'm trying to get to, Tristan.
Well, yes, Jodka, you talk about being able to control your home environment.
Yes.
And obviously with smoking you can decide whether you're going to quit or not, or
Sure.
reduce or not. But I think it's important to realise we actually have far more control than we think outside the home. How do you control air quality in your work environment? Some of your audience might be office-based. Well, is the company you're working for, your employer, actually pumping in polluted air, or are they filtering that air to an extent? Of course, when you look at a substance like lead, for example, because it's heavy, lead settles. So what you might think is perfectly ordinary, benign dust contamination, say on a windowsill or a countertop, and this can apply at the office or your workplace or at home, is not necessarily just dust. So you get some of that onto an apple, a sandwich, a teaspoon before you make a mug of coffee or something, and you then have created the opportunity for direct ingestion of a neurotoxin, something that actually affects the health of your brain. Bad idea. So you have office environments. Those are more easily controlled because they are fixed locations, and the same in manufacturing and industrial facilities. When you move out on location, say if you're working as a cleaner in a school, and you work on a number of sites, maybe, or say if you work in construction, whether for a big company on a single site for months and months, or whether you're going from individual locations, from day to day, you could be putting yourself into exposure risk environments for which there are no visual cues to suggest that there could be an exposure risk. So actually, if you look at dust and air quality in general, if you want to protect yourself, you have to presume the worst because you can't be sure of what you're walking into. So that's something that people need to take more seriously. But of course the challenge is, how do you make people remember something which is invisible and gives no indication that it presents an immediate issue? And that's the other thing, is just because you might inhale air on one particular site for the course of a day, you might feel fine. But the cumulative effect of various exposures
Adds up.
over years and decades, as you say, adds up. And so you've got a time dimension. Just because you don't have visible evidence now, or in your own feeling, that you have a problem, be absolutely sure it's contributing to problems later on. And one of the interesting things that I discovered as recently as yesterday is, how do you think there is a connection between the quality of the air you breathe and back injury?
Wow.
Have you come across that before?
I haven't, to be honest with you. That's the first time I've heard something to do with breathing and having back injury. I mean, coming from an average guy that's not in that sort of field of medical back injuries, the only thing that comes to my mind is that maybe if someone is not breathing in a symphony of normality, whether they've been exercising or they've been gasping and they bend down to do their shoelaces, maybe because of the lack of symphony or the rhythm, they just injure their back because, it's all muscle and tissues and nerves. That's the only thing that comes to my mind, but maybe you can touch upon that more.
Well, symphony is a great word, because actually starting with the letter S, that is the perfect visual for the shape of the human spine. And so what happens is, for many, many different reasons,
Yes.
And smoking is an example, or even the strained breathing through a mask that you're wearing to protect you from dust,
Yeah.
if you're having to breathe more heavily, you're actually forcing your body to hold itself in a position to maximize airflow into your lungs. Given that we're designed for nasal nose breathing, breathing through our lungs means that we have to adjust the position of our head and our chests in order to maximize the airflow into the lungs. And what that does is it creates the need for the spine further down, right at the pelvis level, to adjust. And that creates something that is known and recognized by the medical profession and people who work in and around that space, so physiotherapists, I'm sure people in sports medicine, all of this sort of thing, is something called anterior pelvic tilt. And what it means is basically your pelvis tilts in such a way that that introduces a weakness when it comes to lifting things. So you have a link between the way in which you breathe, and the way you breathe, say even just sitting down, limits the amount of air that we can take in through our noses. So even just sitting down, and they describe sitting as the modern smoking, this is part of the reason that probably nobody's really thought of mentioning before, that sitting down is actually forcing you into more mouth breathing, and therefore supporting this pelvic adjustment, which can be leading to literally structural, bone-based skeleton problems. And you may realize that when it comes to occupational health issues, that so-called musculoskeletal disorders, MSDs, contribute, or rather take out, account for about 650 million of the 850 million costs associated with occupational disease of any kind. It's massive. But who would think to link air quality or the way you breathe as having that sort of really fundamental structural connection? So what's really interesting is that if you do a lot of training and you're doing a lot of heavy breathing, a lot of mouth gasping, etc., you're training and thinking you're doing a great job. It's arguable, given that you're inducing a lot of stress on your body, which is a whole different conversation.
Sure.
And people talk about walking being a far better form of exercise, and I'm sure in part that's due to the impact of breathing on underlying structure. But actually just spending lots of time in a heavy breathing state is actually doing structural damage beyond the obvious damage to knees and joints and everything else from the repetition. But I find that extraordinary.